She thought she was marrying a struggling businessman trying to make ends meet. He drove a modest car, wore simple clothes, and lived in a quiet neighborhood. But on their wedding night, when he opened the door to his true home, a sprawling estate guarded by armed men, she realized the man she loved had been hiding a dangerous secret. As he turned to face her, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them, he whispered words that made her blood run cold. "Welcome to my world, Mrs. Castellano." If you're listening to this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. Rain drummed against the windows of the small cafe on Larkin Street in San Francisco, where Nina Hayes first met Vincent Castellano on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. She ducked inside to escape the downpour, her portfolio clutched against her chest, mascara probably running down her cheeks. He was sitting alone at a corner table, reading a worn paperback, a cup of black coffee growing cold in front of him. Their eyes met. He smiled. Not the practiced, predatory smile she'd learned to recognize from men in the city, but something genuine, almost shy. Within minutes, they were talking. Within an hour, she'd forgotten about her ruined interview across town. Vincent told her he worked in import-export, a vague description that should have raised questions but didn't. He drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door. His apartment in the Sunset District was modest. One bedroom, furniture that looked secondhand, a refrigerator that hummed too loudly. He wore the same leather jacket every time they met, jeans that were worn at the knees, boots that had seen better days. Nina found it refreshing. At 24, she'd dated enough men who flashed money like peacocks displaying feathers, all surface and no substance. Vincent was different. He listened when she talked about her dreams of becoming a graphic designer. He remembered small details, how she took her coffee, that she hated cilantro, that her mother had died when she was 16, and she still wore her ring on a chain around her neck. "You're beautiful when you talk about your work," he told her one evening, as they walked along Ocean Beach, the Pacific stretching gray and endless before them. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face, and he reached out to tuck it behind her ear. His touch was gentle, but there was something in his eyes, a shadow, a weight, that she couldn't quite read. "You're easy to talk to," she said, leaning into him. "I feel like I can tell you anything." He looked away then, toward the horizon where fog was rolling in like a living thing. "I hope you always feel that way." 6 months passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Vincent worked odd hours, sometimes disappearing for days with apologetic texts about shipments and difficult clients. Nina didn't press. She was building her freelance business, working late nights on logo designs and website mock-ups, grateful for a boyfriend who understood the demands of entrepreneurship. He proposed on a rainy evening in March, back at that same cafe where they'd met. No fancy restaurant, no elaborate production, just Vincent on one knee beside their corner table, holding a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the light. "I don't have much," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "but everything I have, everything I am, I want to share with you. Will you marry me, Nina?" She said yes through tears, and when he slipped the ring on her finger, she noticed his hands were shaking. She attributed it to nerves, to the vulnerability of the moment. She didn't see the way his jaw tightened, or how his eyes scanned the cafe's entrance even as he kissed her, or how his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. 3 times, 4, 5, and he ignored it completely. The wedding was small, held at City Hall on a Friday afternoon in June. Nina wore a simple white dress she'd found at a vintage shop in the Mission. Vincent wore a dark suit that looked new, the first truly expensive thing she'd seen him buy. Her father walked her down the marble corridor, his hand tight on her arm. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" he whispered. "You don't know much about this man." "I know enough," she whispered back. "I know he loves me." But as they approached Vincent, waiting at the end of the corridor with his best man, a tall, severe-looking man named Marco, who'd barely spoken to her during the rehearsal, she caught something in her fiancé's expression. Relief, yes. Love, certainly. But also something else. Something that looked almost like regret. The ceremony was brief. They exchanged vows, kissed as husband and wife, signed papers that made it official. A handful of her friends threw rice on the City Hall steps. Vincent's side of the guest list was notably sparse. Just Marco and 2 other men in dark suits who stood at a distance, watching the street more than the celebration. "Where's your family?" Nina had asked weeks earlier when they were planning. "Don't have much family left," Vincent had said, his voice flat. "Lost my parents young. grew up in the system. She'd held him then, heart aching for the lonely boy he must have been. She didn't push for more details. Everyone had pain they weren't ready to share. The reception was at a modest Italian restaurant in North Beach. Just 20 guests crowded around pushed-together tables. Wine flowed freely. Nina's best friend Sarah gave a teary toast about true love and taking chances. Marco's toast was shorter. Stranger. To Vincent and Nina. May you find the peace you're looking for, V. Vincent's hand tightened on his wine glass. Nina squeezed his knee under the table, thinking he was emotional. She didn't notice how Marco's eyes held a warning, or how the 2 other men from Vincent's side never touched their drinks, their attention constantly on the door. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Vincent leaned close to Nina's ear. Ready to go home, Mrs. Castellano? The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Castellano. Her new identity. Her new life. I thought we were going to your apartment, she said. Something flickered across his face. I have a surprise for you. Our real home. What do you mean? He stood, offering his hand. Trust me. She took his hand without hesitation, letting him lead her out into the warm June night. Marco and the other men followed at a distance, and for the first time, Nina felt a prickle of unease. The way they moved, the way they flanked Vincent like a protective detail, the way their eyes never stopped scanning the street. It wasn't normal. Vincent, she said, as he opened the door of a black SUV she'd never seen before. Not his dented Civic, but a vehicle with tinted windows and leather interior that smelled expensive. What's going on? He helped her inside, his touch tender despite the tension she could feel radiating from his body. I need to show you something. I need to tell you the truth. Her heart began to pound. What truth? He climbed in beside her, and Marco took the driver's seat. The other men got into a second SUV behind them. As they pulled away from the restaurant, Vincent took both her hands in his. I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am, he began, and the rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall, drops racing down the windows like tears. About what I do, about the life you've just married into. Nina's mouth went dry. You're scaring me. I never wanted to scare you. I never wanted any of this to touch you. He looked at their joined hands, at the matching gold bands that now bound them together. But you're my wife now. You deserve to know everything. And I promise you, Nina, I will protect you. No matter what comes, I will keep you safe. The SUV turned onto the highway, heading south out of the city. Through the rain-streaked windows, San Francisco's lights began to fade behind them, and Nina felt as though she were leaving behind everything familiar, crossing into a territory she didn't understand. Vincent's thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture of comfort that did nothing to slow her racing heart. Tell me, she whispered. Whatever it is, just tell me. He met her eyes then, and she saw the full weight of what he'd been hiding. The danger, the power, the darkness he'd kept carefully concealed behind his gentle smiles and modest apartment. My name is Vincent Castellano, he said quietly, and I'm not a businessman. I'm the head of the Castellano family. In San Francisco, that means something. It means I control the docks, the unions, the flow of goods, legal and otherwise, through this city. It means I have enemies who would hurt you to get to me. It means the man you married isn't poor, Nina. He's one of the most powerful men in California. The rain hammered harder against the roof of the SUV, and Nina felt her world tilting, everything she thought she knew sliding away like water down a drain. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Vincent watched her, his dark eyes filled with something that looked like fear. Fear that she would hate him. Fear that he'd lost her before their marriage had truly begun. The SUV's headlights cut through the darkness and rain, carrying them toward a truth Nina wasn't sure she was ready to face, toward a home she'd never imagined, toward a wedding night that would change everything. The drive took 40 minutes, though it felt like hours. Nina sat in silence, her hand still in Vincent's, her mind struggling to process what he'd told her. A mafia boss. The words sounded absurd, like something from a movie. Not her real life. Not the man who'd held her while she cried about a lost client, who'd learned to make her favorite pasta dish, who'd fallen asleep on her couch with his head in her lap while they watched old movies. Say something, Vincent finally said, his voice strained. Please, I don't know what to say. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. I don't understand. You lived in that tiny apartment. You drove that terrible car. You said you were struggling to make ends meet. I lied. The admission seemed to cost him. About a lot of things. The apartment was real. I kept it as a safe house, a place to go when I needed to disappear. The car was deliberate. I wanted to meet someone who would see me, not my money or my name. I wanted something real. So our entire relationship was based on a lie. My circumstances were a lie. My feelings never were. He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. Everything I felt for you, every moment we shared, that was real, Nina. That was the most honest I've ever been with anyone. She wanted to pull away, but his touch was so familiar, so right, even now. When were you going to tell me? I don't know. I kept waiting for the right moment, but there never was one. How do you tell someone you love that you're not who they think you are? That marrying you might put them in danger? His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I almost called off the wedding a dozen times, but I'm a selfish bastard, Nina. I couldn't let you go. The SUV turned off the highway onto a private road, and through the rain, Nina could see gates, massive iron gates with a security booth and armed guards. Her stomach dropped. Armed guards. This was real. This was actually happening. The gates swung open and they drove through, following a winding driveway lined with oak trees. Then the house came into view, and Nina's breath caught. It wasn't a house. It was an estate. A sprawling Mediterranean-style villa with cream-colored walls, terracotta roof tiles, and lights glowing in what seemed like 100 windows. Fountains flanked the circular driveway. Manicured gardens stretched into the darkness. "This is where you live?" she whispered. "This is where we live now," Vincent corrected gently. "This is your home, if you'll have it, if you'll have me." Marco pulled up to the front entrance, where more men in dark suits waited under the shelter of a portico. They moved with military precision, opening doors, scanning the surroundings. One of them held an umbrella, shielding Nina from the rain as Vincent helped her out of the SUV. She stood there, her simple wedding dress already damp at the hem, staring up at the mansion that belonged in a magazine spread, not in her life. Vincent's hand was warm on the small of her back, guiding her toward the massive double doors. Inside, the entrance hall took her breath away. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor. Original artwork hung on the walls, pieces she recognized from her art history classes, paintings that belonged in museums. The air smelled of flowers and expensive wood polish. A woman in her 60s approached, her gray hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her eyes kind despite the formality of her black dress. "Welcome home, Mrs. Castellano. I'm Teresa. I manage the household staff. If you need anything at all, you have only to ask. Mrs. Castellano." There it was again, that name that now felt weighted with meaning she was only beginning to understand. "Thank you," Nina managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Teresa's expression softened. "I've prepared the master suite. I thought you might want some privacy this evening." She glanced at Vincent with something that looked like approval. "It's good to see you happy, Vincent. Your father would have been proud." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Thank you, Teresa. That'll be all for tonight." As Teresa disappeared down a side corridor, Nina turned to face her husband. They were alone now in the vast entrance hall, the sound of rain against windows the only noise. "Your father? Died 5 years ago. Heart attack." Vincent's voice was flat, emotionless. "I took over the family business when I was 25, youngest boss in the family's history. And your mother? Cancer, when I was 12. After that, it was just me and my father." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she recognized as stress. "You raised me for this life, Nina. I never had a choice. You don't walk away from the family. You lead it, or you die." The casual mention of death sent a chill through her. "Is that what happens? People die?" "Sometimes." He met her eyes, unflinching. "This isn't a game. The men who work for me, the families we're allied with, the enemies we've made, it's all real. The violence is real. I've done things I'm not proud of to protect what's mine, to keep this organization running." Nina wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the house. "Have you killed people?" The question hung between them. Vincent didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, Nina had her answer. Her stomach turned. "I've protected my family," he finally said. "I've made hard choices. I won't lie to you anymore, Nina. Not about this. You want to know who I am. I'm a man who does what's necessary. But I'm also a man who loves you more than anything in this world. Those two things exist in me at the same time." She didn't know what to say to that. How did you reconcile the gentle man who'd brought her soup when she was sick with someone who'd taken lives? How did you accept that the person you'd married was capable of violence? "I need to think," she said, her voice shaking. I need time to process this. Of course. Vincent gestured toward the staircase. I'll show you to our room. You can have all the space you need. I can sleep in one of the guest rooms if you want. Our wedding night, and you're offering to sleep in a guest room? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Our wedding night, and I've just told my bride I'm a criminal. Not exactly the romantic evening I'd planned. Despite everything, Nina felt a hysterical laugh bubble up. What did you plan? To tell you the truth? Yes. But also to show you that this life, this world, it doesn't have to be dark. There's beauty here too. Power, yes, but also protection. Security. The ability to help people. To build something that matters. He offered his hand. Let me show you? She looked at his outstretched hand, at the gold band on his finger that matched hers. She could refuse. She could demand he take her back to the city, to her tiny apartment in the Tenderloin, to her old life. But would that life even exist anymore? She was Nina Castellano now, married to a Mafia boss. There was no going back. She took his hand. He led her up the grand staircase, down a hallway lined with more artwork and family photographs. Vincent as a boy with a stern-looking man who must have been his father. Vincent as a teenager looking uncomfortable in a suit. Vincent at 20-something, his eyes already carrying the weight she now recognized. At the end of the hall, he opened a door to reveal the master suite. It was breathtaking. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the room, dressed in white linens that looked impossibly soft. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens and, beyond them, the lights of the valley below. A sitting area with a fireplace, a door leading to what looked like a luxurious bathroom, fresh flowers on every surface. Roses, her favorite. You remembered, she said softly, touching the petals of a cream-colored rose. I remember everything about you. Vincent stood in the doorway, giving her space. The first time you laughed at one of my terrible jokes. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating on a design. How you cry at commercials, but not at sad movies. The sound you make when you're falling asleep. I remember all of it, Nina, because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. She turned to face him, tears finally spilling over. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this life. He crossed the room then, pulling her into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent, cologne and rain and something uniquely him. His heart beat steady under her ear. You're the strongest person I know, he murmured into her hair. You survived losing your mother. You built a business from nothing. You took a chance on a guy in a coffee shop who looked like he couldn't afford a decent meal. You're stronger than you think. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you smart, keeps you careful. He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. But I need you to hear this, Nina. I will never let anyone hurt you. The men you saw tonight, the security, the gates, that's all to protect what matters most to me. You matter most to me. She searched his eyes, looking for the lie, for the manipulation. But all she saw was the man she'd fallen in love with, stripped of his disguise, raw and vulnerable in a way she suspected he rarely allowed himself to be. Show me, she whispered. Show me this life can be more than what I'm imagining. Relief flooded his features. He kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she might break. When he pulled away, he took her hand and led her to the windows. With a touch of a button, the curtains drew back fully, revealing the estate spread below them. The gardens with their winding paths and hidden grottos, the pool house lit from within, the tennis courts and guest cottages, and beyond it all, the valley stretching toward the distant glow of San Francisco. My grandfather bought this land in 1952, Vincent said quietly. He was an immigrant from Sicily, came here with nothing but the clothes on his back and a willingness to do whatever it took to survive. He built this family from the ground up. My father expanded it, made it legitimate in ways my grandfather never could. And now it's mine to protect, to grow, to pass on. To your children? Nina asked, the implication hanging heavy. Maybe. Someday. If we're lucky. He glanced at her, vulnerable again. I want a family with you, Nina. I want to build something that lasts. But I understand if that's not what you want anymore. If this is too much. She thought about her tiny apartment, her freelance work that barely paid the bills, her lonely nights wondering if she'd ever find someone who truly saw her. She thought about Vincent in that coffee shop, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world. She thought about the past 6 months, the laughter and the quiet moments and the growing certainty that she'd found something rare. And she thought about the lies, the danger, the violence he'd admitted to, the impossible choice she now faced. "I don't know if I can be a mafia wife," she said honestly. "I don't know what that even means. It means you're protected. It means you're respected. It means you have resources to do whatever you want with your life. Your design business, charity work, anything." He turned her to face him. "But it also means there will be times I can't tell you where I'm going or what I'm doing. It means there are people who might see you as a target. It means living with security, with precautions, with the knowledge that my world is dangerous." "Why did you choose me?" The question burst out of her. "You could have anyone. Why risk bringing someone into this who doesn't understand it?" "Because you're real." His voice was fierce. "Because when I'm with you, I'm not Vincent Castellano, boss of the family. I'm just Vincent, just a man who wants to make you smile, who wants to hear about your day, who wants to fall asleep next to you and wake up knowing you're there. You gave me that, Nina. You gave me a piece of normalcy in a life that's anything but normal." The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and through the windows, Nina could see the clouds beginning to break, revealing stars. She thought about her mother, who'd always told her to follow her heart, even when her head said to run. She thought about the ring on her finger, the vows she'd made just hours ago. For better or worse, she'd meant them. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to understand this world before I can decide if I can live in it. Can you give me that?" "I'll give you whatever you need." Vincent's relief was palpable. "We'll take it slow. I'll introduce you to the family, show you how things work. No pressure, no expectations, just stay. Please stay." She nodded, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. It had been the longest day of her life, and it wasn't even over. Vincent seemed to sense her fatigue. He guided her to the bed, helped her out of her shoes, found a robe in the closet for her to change into. "I'll be right back," he said, disappearing into the bathroom. She heard water running, and when he returned, he took her hand and led her into a bathroom that looked like something from a luxury spa. He'd drawn a bath, the tub filled with steaming water and rose petals, candles flickering on every surface. "For my bride," he said softly. "Take your time. I'll be in the sitting room if you need me." As Nina sank into the hot water, letting the tension of the evening seep out of her muscles, she heard Vincent moving around in the bedroom, his phone ringing once, his low voice giving orders to someone, her husband, her mafia boss husband. The absurdity of it would have made her laugh if she wasn't so close to crying. But beneath the fear and confusion, there was something else, a spark of curiosity, a question forming in her mind. What if she could do this? What if she could be strong enough, brave enough, to build a life in this strange new world? Through the bathroom door, she heard Vincent's voice, gentle and familiar. "Good night, Teresa." "Yes, she's okay. Thank you for everything." The man who commanded an empire, speaking kindly to his housekeeper. The man who'd killed to protect his family, drawing her a bath with rose petals. The contradictions were dizzying, but they were real. He was real, and for better or worse, he was hers. Nina woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud, with the warm weight of Vincent's arm draped across her waist. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The wedding, the revelation, the estate. She turned her head carefully to look at her husband. He was already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. In the morning light, she could see details she'd missed before. A thin scar along his jawline, shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead making him look younger, almost vulnerable. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. "A while. I don't sleep much." He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly familiar. "I kept thinking you might disappear, that I'd wake up and you'd be gone." "I thought about it," she admitted. "Around 3 a.m, I thought about calling a cab and just leaving." His hand stilled. "Why didn't you?" "Because I made a promise. And because—" She paused, trying to find the right words. "Because I need to know if the man I fell in love with is still in there, underneath all of this." "He is." Vincent's voice was rough. "He's right here, terrified he's going to lose you." Before Nina could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Vincent called out permission to enter, and Teresa appeared with a breakfast cart laden with coffee, fresh pastries, fruit, and what looked like eggs Benedict. "Good morning, Mrs. Castellano. I thought you might prefer breakfast in your room this morning." Teresa's smile was warm, grandmotherly. "The household is eager to meet you." but I told them to give you time to adjust. The household? Nina asked as Teresa set up the breakfast on a table by the windows. The staff. We have 12 people who work here full-time. Housekeepers, groundskeepers, security, kitchen staff. They're all very excited that Vincent has finally married. Teresa shot Vincent a meaningful look. It's been too long since this house had a woman's touch. After Teresa left, Nina and Vincent ate in companionable silence, the awkwardness of the previous night giving way to something more familiar. He still took his coffee black. She still picked the strawberries out of the fruit salad first. Small things, normal things, that reminded her why she'd fallen for him in the first place. What happens now? She asked, setting down her fork. Do I just live here? Do I go back to work? Do I pretend everything is normal? You do whatever you want, Vincent said. Your design business is yours. You can work from here. I'll set up an office for you, whatever equipment you need, or you can keep your studio in the city. The only thing I ask is that you let Marco or one of the other men drive you. No more taking the bus or walking alone. The casual mention of constant security made her stomach tighten. I can't have a bodyguard following me everywhere. You can, and you will. His tone left no room for argument. I have enemies, Nina. People who would love to hurt me by hurting you. I won't take that risk. Who are these enemies? Vincent set down his coffee cup, his expression hardening in a way that reminded her exactly who she'd married. The Moretti family controls Oakland. We've had an uneasy truce for years, but Giovanni Moretti has been pushing boundaries, trying to take over some of our territory. Then there's the Russians. They've been moving into the Bay Area, trying to cut into our operations. And there are always the feds, looking for any excuse to bring down the family. The FBI is after you? They've been investigating my family for decades. They've never been able to make anything stick. A grim smile. My father taught me well. Keep the legitimate businesses clean, keep the other operations compartmentalized, and never, ever leave evidence. Nina pushed her plate away, appetite gone. What are the other operations? Do you really want to know? She met his eyes. If I'm going to stay, I need to know what I'm part of. Vincent stood, walking to the windows, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. We control the Longshoremen's Union, which means we control what comes in and out of the port of San Francisco. Some of that is legitimate cargo. Some of it isn't. We have interests in construction, waste management, several restaurants and nightclubs. We provide protection to businesses in our territory. They pay us. We make sure nothing bad happens to them. And we move goods that people want but can't get through legal channels. Drugs? The word came out sharper than she intended. No. He turned to face her, his expression fierce. That's a line I won't cross. My father died because of drugs. Not using them, but because the violence they bring into our world. I've kept the family out of that business, even though it's cost us. But guns, stolen goods, gambling, yes, those are part of what we do. Nina absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man describing criminal enterprises with the man who'd cried when she'd shown him the wedding invitation design she'd created. And the violence? You said you've done things you're not proud of. I've protected what's mine. I've sent messages to people who thought they could take from us without consequences. I've made examples. He came back to the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm a good man, Nina. I'm not. But I'm a man who keeps his word, who protects his family, who honors the rules of this life. And I'm a man who loves you enough to let you walk away if this is too much. She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing both the criminal and the man who'd held her hand through a scary movie, who'd learned to cook her favorite meal, who'd proposed in a coffee shop because it was where they'd met. The contradictions should have been impossible, but they weren't. They were just, Vincent. I'm not walking away, she said quietly. Not yet, but I need to understand this world. I need to see it, not just hear about it. Relief and concern warred on his face. That's dangerous. Being your wife is dangerous. At least let me be an informed wife. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marco entered, his expression grave. Boss, we have a situation. Giovanni Moretti is here. He's asking to meet the new Mrs. Castellano. Vincent's entire demeanor changed. The vulnerable husband disappeared, replaced by someone harder, colder. He's here? At the estate? At the front gate with 6 of his men. He says it's a courtesy call, to pay respects to your bride. Marco's tone made it clear he didn't believe that for a second. It's a power play. Vincent stood, his jaw tight. He wants to see if she's a weakness he can exploit. Then let's show him I'm not, Nina said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Let's show him I'm not afraid. Both men turned to stare at her. Vincent shook his head. Absolutely not. You don't need to meet Giovanni Moretti, but I'm going to meet him eventually, right? If he's your enemy, if he's a threat, I should know what he looks like. I should look him in the eye so he knows I'm not some fragile thing that's going to break. She stood, squaring her shoulders. You said I'm stronger than I think. Let me prove it. Vincent studied her for a long moment, something like pride flickering in his eyes. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. 20 minutes later, Nina stood beside Vincent in the estate's formal sitting room, wearing a simple but elegant dress that Teresa had somehow produced in her size. Her hair was pulled back, her mother's ring visible on its chain at her throat. She'd put on makeup, armor in the form of lipstick and eyeliner, and she stood with her spine straight, her hand in Vincent's. When Giovanni Moretti walked in, Nina understood immediately why Vincent considered him dangerous. He was in his 50s, silver-haired and handsome in an expensive suit, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Behind him, 6 men fanned out, their hands never far from their jackets. Vincent. Giovanni's voice was smooth, cultured. Congratulations on your marriage. I was sorry not to receive an invitation to the wedding. It was a small ceremony. Family only. Vincent's tone was ice. What do you want, Giovanni? Just to pay my respects to your beautiful bride. Giovanni turned his attention to Nina, and she felt the weight of his assessment, the calculation behind his pleasant expression. Mrs. Castellano, welcome to the family business. I hope Vincent has explained to you the complexities of our world. He's explained enough, Nina said, keeping her voice steady. And I'm a fast learner. I'm sure you are. Giovanni's smile widened. It's refreshing to see Vincent so domesticated. Marriage changes a man, makes him think about things differently, makes him more cautious, perhaps, more willing to negotiate rather than fight. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Vincent's hand tightened on Nina's. My marriage doesn't change anything about how I run my family, Giovanni. If anything, it gives me more reason to protect what's mine. I'd remember that, if I were you. Of course, of course. Giovanni spread his hands in a gesture of peace. I meant no offense. I simply wanted to meet the woman who finally captured Vincent Castellano's heart. It's quite an accomplishment. Many have tried. All have failed. Until you. Nina felt the subtext. He was telling her she was a target, that her relationship with Vincent made her valuable, exploitable. She lifted her chin. I'm not interested in being part of your games, Mr. Moretti. I'm interested in building a life with my husband. I'd appreciate it if you'd respect that. Something flickered in Giovanni's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Direct. I like that. Very well, Mrs. Castellano. I'll respect your wishes. But understand this. The world your husband operates in doesn't respect boundaries. Sooner or later, you'll be drawn into our games whether you want to be or not. I hope, when that time comes, you'll remember that I was courteous today. And I hope you'll remember that threatening my wife, even subtly, is a line you don't want to cross. Vincent's voice was deadly quiet. Marco will show you out. After Giovanni and his men left, Nina's legs nearly gave out. Vincent caught her, guiding her to a chair. You were incredible, he said, kneeling in front of her. The way you stood up to him. Nina, you were perfect. I was terrified, she admitted, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He was threatening me, wasn't he? That whole speech about being drawn into games. Yes, he was testing us, seeing if you're a weakness. But you showed him you're not. You showed him you're strong. Vincent pressed a kiss to her forehead. I'm so damn proud of you. Over the next few weeks, Nina began to understand the reality of her new life. She met the family, not Vincent's blood relatives, but the men who worked for him, their wives and children, the network of loyalty and obligation that formed the Castellano organization. She learned names and faces, learned to read the subtle hierarchies, learned which women were allies and which were merely polite. Marco became a constant presence, her shadow whenever she left the estate. She fought it at first, hated the loss of freedom, but gradually came to appreciate his quiet competence. He drove her to meetings with clients, waited outside coffee shops while she worked, and never made her feel like a prisoner. Her design business actually grew. Word spread that she was Vincent Castellano's wife, and suddenly companies that had never returned her calls were eager to work with her. It should have felt like cheating, but Vincent pointed out that her talent was real, The name just got her in the door. What she did once she was there was all her. She set up an office in one of the estate's guest cottages, a bright space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. Vincent had it equipped with the best computer equipment, the fastest internet, everything she could possibly need. When she protested the expense, he'd simply said, "You're my wife. Your dreams are my dreams now." But there were dark moments, too. Nights when Vincent came home late, his knuckles bruised, his eyes haunted. Times when he disappeared for days with no explanation, and she'd pace the estate wondering if he was safe, if he was hurting someone, if he'd come back at all. Mornings when she'd wake to find him standing at the window, staring out at the dawn, the weight of his responsibilities written in every line of his body. One night, 6 weeks after the wedding, Nina woke to find Vincent's side of the bed empty. She found him in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at a photograph on his desk. When she got closer, she saw it was a picture of a young man, early 20s, with Vincent's dark eyes and sharp features. "Who is that?" she asked softly. Vincent didn't look up. "My cousin Anthony. He was like a brother to me. He died 3 years ago in a hit ordered by the Morettis. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't protect him." Nina's heart ached at the raw pain in his voice. She moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, resting her chin on top of his head. "I'm sorry. This life takes everything eventually," he said quietly. "Everyone I love, everyone who matters, they're all at risk because of who I am. And now you're at risk too. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and I think about what I've done, bringing you into this. What kind of man does that to someone he loves? The kind of man who's human," Nina said. "The kind of man who wants connection despite the danger. The kind of man who's brave enough to hope for something better." He turned in the chair, pulling her into his lap, burying his face in her neck. She held him, this powerful man who controlled an empire but couldn't control his fear of losing her. And in that moment, Nina realized something crucial. She wasn't just staying because she'd made a promise, or because she was too afraid to leave. She was staying because she loved him, all of him. The darkness and the light, the violence and the tenderness, the criminal and the man who drew her baths with rose petals. She was staying because, despite everything, she'd found something real in this dangerous world, and she wasn't ready to let it go. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late August, 3 months after the wedding. Nina was in her office, working on a logo design for a tech startup, when Marco burst through the door without knocking, something he never did. "We need to go. Now." His face was ashen, his hand on his weapon. "Vincent's orders." "What's happening?" Nina stood, her heart already racing. "The Morettis hit one of our warehouses. 3 of our men are dead. Vincent thinks they might come here next." He was already moving, pulling her toward the door. "We have a safe house in Napa. You'll stay there until this is over." "Where's Vincent?" "Handling it. He'll meet you when he can." Marco's tone left no room for argument. "Mrs. Castellano, please. We need to move." The next hours were a blur. Marco drove her north in an unmarked car, taking back roads, constantly checking his mirrors. 2 other cars followed. More security, more men with guns. Nina tried calling Vincent, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried texting. No response. The safe house was a modest ranch-style home in the middle of wine country, surrounded by vineyards and hills, beautiful and isolated. Marco swept through the house, checking locks, setting up security. 2 men took positions outside. Another monitored security cameras. "How long will I be here?" Nina asked, feeling like a prisoner despite the comfortable surroundings. "Until Vincent says it's safe." Marco's expression was grim. "Mrs. Castellano, I need you to understand. This is serious. The Morettis have declared war. Until we know what their next move is, you're the most valuable target they have. Because I'm Vincent's wife. Because you're Vincent's weakness. They know he'd do anything to protect you. That makes you leverage." Nina spent the next 3 days in the safe house, watching news reports about a gang war in San Francisco, about shootings and fires and police investigations. She watched her phone obsessively, waiting for word from Vincent. When he finally called on the 3rd night, his voice was rough with exhaustion. "Are you okay?" he asked, before she could say anything. "I'm fine. Vincent, what's happening? The news is saying..." "Don't believe the news. It's under control." But he didn't sound like it was under control. He sounded like a man barely holding it together. "I'm sorry, Nina. I'm so sorry I brought you into this." When can I come home? A long pause. Soon. I promise. I just need to finish this. Finish what? What I should have done years ago. The line went dead. Nina didn't sleep that night. She paced the safe house, imagining worst-case scenarios, picturing Vincent hurt or dead or in prison. Marco tried to reassure her, but even he looked worried. On the fourth day, Teresa arrived with fresh clothes and food, her presence a comfort. He's going to be okay, Teresa said, sitting with Nina in the kitchen. I've known Vincent since he was a boy. He's strong, smart. He'll come through this. What if he doesn't? Nina's voice broke. What if I lose him? Then you'll survive, because that's what the women in this life do. We survive. Teresa took her hand. But you won't lose him. That boy loves you more than anything. He'll move heaven and earth to come back to you. On the fifth day, Vincent finally came. Nina heard the cars pull up, heard Marco's voice giving the all clear, and then Vincent was there, walking through the door. He looked terrible, bruised, exhausted, his clothes rumpled, his eyes haunted, but he was alive. Nina ran to him and he caught her, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he kept saying. I'm so sorry. Are you hurt? She pulled back, checking him for injuries. Nothing serious. Nina, we need to talk. He led her to the living room, sat her down on the couch. Marco and the other men discreetly disappeared. Giovanni Moretti is dead. The words hung in the air. Nina's mouth went dry. You killed him? He killed 3 of my men. He tried to kill me. He was planning to kidnap you. Vincent's voice was flat, emotionless. So yes, I killed him. I put a bullet in his head and I watched him die, and I'd do it again to protect you. Nina should have been horrified. She should have run. But all she felt was a strange sense of relief that the threat was gone, that Vincent was safe. What did that make her? What happens now? She asked. Now we deal with the consequences. The Moretti family is in chaos. Giovanni's son Luca has taken over, but he's young, inexperienced. The other families are watching to see if we'll go to war or make peace. The feds are investigating, and he ran a hand through his hair. I need to decide what kind of man I want to be, what kind of life I want to give you. What do you mean? Vincent stood, walking to the window, his back to her. When I thought I might lose you, when I thought the Morettis might take you from me, I realized something. This life, the violence, the constant threat, the blood on my hands, it's not worth it if it means putting you in danger. Nothing is worth that. Vincent, I want out, Nina. He turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes. I want to walk away from the family, from all of it. I want to be the man you thought I was when we met. Just Vincent, not Vincent Castellano, boss of the family. I want to give you a normal life, a safe life. Nina stood, crossing to him. You can't just walk away. You said yourself, you lead or you die. There are ways. I can hand control to Marco, make it look like I'm stepping back for health reasons. I can move us somewhere else, somewhere far from San Francisco and the family and all of this. His hands framed her face. I can choose you over everything else, if you'll let me. She searched his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the desperate hope, but she also saw the fear that walking away would make him less, that without the family he'd be nothing, that she'd leave him anyway. I don't want you to give up who you are for me, she said carefully. I fell in love with Vincent Castellano, all of him, including the parts that are hard and dangerous and complicated. If you walk away from the family because you want to, because it's what's best for you, then I'll support that. But don't do it just because you're afraid of losing me. I am afraid of losing you. Terrified. Then let me make a choice too. Nina took a deep breath, hardly believing what she was about to say. I choose to stay. I choose this life, with all its dangers and complications. I choose you, Vincent, exactly as you are. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never lie to me again. Promise me you'll let me in. Let me be part of this world instead of just something you're protecting. Promise me we'll face whatever comes together. Vincent pulled her close, and she felt him trembling. I promise. God, Nina, I promise. You're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. But I'm also sure. She pulled back to look at him. We're in this together now. For better or worse, remember? He kissed her then, desperate and tender, and Nina tasted salt. His tears or hers, she wasn't sure. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, she agreed. making him laugh despite everything. But you're stuck with me anyway. They stayed in the safe house for another week, while the situation in San Francisco stabilized. During that time, Vincent told her everything about the family's operations, about the alliances and enemies, about the decisions he'd made, and the ones he regretted. He showed her the books, the legitimate businesses, and the criminal enterprises, holding nothing back. Nina listened, asked questions, tried to understand the complex web of loyalty and obligation that governed this world. It was overwhelming, but it was also strangely fascinating. She began to see the family not as a criminal organization, but as a business. Ruthless, yes, and operating outside the law, but with its own logic and structure. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset over the vineyards, Vincent said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about not walking away just because I'm afraid. And I think there's a middle path. I don't have to be the man my father was, running everything with an iron fist. I can modernize, legitimize more of the operations, reduce the violence. I can be a different kind of boss." He took her hand. "With you beside me, I think I can build something better, something my father never imagined." "That sounds like a lot of work," Nina said. "It will be, but I think it's worth it. For us, for the future." He glanced at her, vulnerable again. "What do you think?" Nina thought about the past 3 months, about everything she'd learned and experienced. She thought about the man beside her, flawed and dangerous, but also capable of such tenderness. She thought about the life they could build together, if they were brave enough to try. "I think," she said slowly, "that we should go home, back to San Francisco, back to the estate. I think we should face this together, whatever comes. And I think we should start planning that future you're talking about." Vincent's smile was like sunrise. "Yeah? Yeah." She squeezed his hand. "But Vincent, no more secrets, no more protecting me by keeping me in the dark. If we're doing this, we're doing it as partners." "Partners," he agreed. "I like the sound of that." As they drove back to San Francisco the next day, Nina watched the city come into view, the Golden Gate Bridge spanning the bay, the skyline rising against the blue sky, the place that was now her home. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 months ago, naive and hopeful, thinking she was marrying a struggling businessman. That girl was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd looked at the darkness and chosen to stay anyway. Someone who'd found love in the most unlikely place and decided it was worth fighting for. Mrs. Nina Castellano. The name still felt strange, but it was starting to feel like hers, like something she'd earned rather than something that had been thrust upon her. Vincent reached over and took her hand, and she held on tight, ready to face whatever came next, together. The estate felt different when they returned. Not physically. The same marble floors, the same crystal chandeliers, the same gardens stretching toward the valley. But Nina saw it differently now. This wasn't just Vincent's house or even their home. It was the headquarters of an empire, and she was no longer just the boss's wife. She was part of the operation. Vincent kept his promise. Over the next months, he brought her into meetings, explained decisions, asked for her input. At first, the men were skeptical. Marco especially seemed uncomfortable with Nina's presence in the room when they discussed business. But gradually, as she proved she could keep secrets and think strategically, the skepticism faded into grudging respect. "The waterfront property in Oakland," Nina said during a meeting in October, studying the documents spread across Vincent's desk. "You're planning to buy it through a shell corporation, clean it up, and flip it for legitimate development?" "That's the idea," Vincent confirmed. "It gets us into Oakland legally, establishes a presence that doesn't involve stepping on the new Moretti leadership's toes. But you're also positioning yourself to control the development contracts, which means you'll have leverage over who works in that area." Nina looked up at him. "It's smart. You're building legitimate power that also serves your other interests." Marco, standing by the window, actually smiled. "She's got a head for this, boss." "Told you," Vincent said, pride evident in his voice. Nina threw herself into understanding the family's operations. She studied the legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the construction company, the waste management contracts. She learned about the unions, the port operations, the complex network of favors and obligations that kept everything running. And yes, she learned about the criminal side too, the protection rackets, the stolen goods, the gambling operations. It should have bothered her more than it did, but she'd come to understand that in Vincent's world, everything existed in shades of gray. protection money they collected from businesses, those businesses genuinely were protected. No robberies, no vandalism, no harassment. The stolen goods they moved, luxury items taken from people who could afford to replace them, sold to people who couldn't afford retail prices. The gambling? Consensual, among adults who knew the risks. Was it legal? No. Was it moral? Debatable. But it was the reality of the world she'd chosen, and she was learning to navigate it. Her design business became a useful front. She took on legitimate clients, built a real portfolio, but she also designed websites and marketing materials for the family's businesses. She created a logo for their construction company that was so good, it won an industry award. She rebranded one of their restaurants, and within months it was featured in San Francisco magazine. "You're making us look respectable," Vincent joked one evening as they reviewed her latest designs. "That's the idea," Nina said. "The more legitimate you look, the harder it is for the feds to justify investigating you. Plus, these businesses actually make money, real money, that you can spend without worrying about where it came from." Vincent pulled her into his lap, kissing her neck. "Have I mentioned lately that marrying you was the smartest thing I've ever done?" "Not in the last hour," she teased, then sobered. "Vincent, I've been thinking. If we're really going to modernize the family, we need to think bigger. Not just legitimate businesses as fronts, but actually transitioning away from the criminal operations over time." He stilled. "That's a long game. Could take decades. So, we have time. And think about it. If you could build something that our children could inherit without the constant threat of violence or prison, wouldn't that be worth it? Our children." His voice was soft, hopeful. Nina turned to face him. "Eventually. Maybe. If we can make this world safe enough for them." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Nina felt the future opening up before them, complicated and uncertain, but theirs to shape. But not everyone was happy with the changes Vincent was implementing. In November, tensions came to a head during a meeting with the family's captains, the men who ran different aspects of the operation. Nina sat beside Vincent, taking notes as they discussed the transition plan. "You're going soft," said Tony Battaglia, one of the older captains who'd worked for Vincent's father. "First you make peace with the Morettis instead of wiping them out. Then you start shutting down profitable operations because they're too risky. Now you're bringing your wife to family meetings? This isn't how things are done, Vincent." The room went silent. Nina felt every eye on her, felt the weight of judgment and resentment. Vincent's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once, a warning to stay calm. "Times change, Tony," Vincent said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The old ways got my father a heart attack at 55 and my cousin killed in a pointless war. I'm building something that lasts, something that doesn't require a body count to maintain. If you can't adapt, maybe it's time you retired." Tony's face flushed red. "Your father would be ashamed. My father is dead." Vincent stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I'm the boss now. My wife is my partner, and she has more strategic sense than half the men in this room. You'll treat her with respect, or you'll find yourself out of the family. Are we clear?" Tony looked around, seeking support, but the other men avoided his gaze. Marco stood behind Vincent, his hand resting casually on his weapon, a subtle reminder of where loyalties lay. "Clear," Tony finally muttered. After the meeting, Nina found Vincent in his study, staring out at the gardens. "You didn't have to defend me like that," she said softly. "Yes, I did. You're my wife. You're part of this family. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me." He turned to face her. "Are you okay?" Tony was out of line. "I'm fine. But Vincent, he's not wrong that I'm changing things. My being here, my influence, it's shifting the dynamic." "Good. The dynamic needed shifting." He pulled her close. "You make me better, Nina. You make this whole organization better. Don't ever doubt that." In December, they got their first real test of the new approach. A rival crew from Los Angeles tried to move into San Francisco, targeting one of the family's gambling operations. The old Vincent would have responded with violence, a hit, a message written in blood. Instead, Nina suggested a different approach. "Buy them out," she said. "Offer them a partnership in a legitimate casino development in Reno. Give them a way to make money without stepping on your territory." "They tried to steal from us," Marco objected. "We can't just reward that. We're not rewarding it. We're redirecting it." Nina pulled up the financial projections she'd been working on. "Look, if we go to war, we lose money, we lose men, We draw attention from law enforcement. If we offer them this deal, we gain a foothold in Nevada. We avoid violence, and we look like legitimate businessmen making a strategic partnership. Plus, we can keep an eye on them, make sure they don't try anything else. Vincent studied the numbers, then looked at his men. What do you think? It's risky, Marco said, but it might work, and it's better than another war. They made the offer. The LA crew, surprised by the approach, accepted. Within weeks, the partnership was established, and the Castellano family had expanded into Nevada without firing a shot. The other families took notice. Vincent Castellano was playing a different game, and he was winning. Christmas came, and Nina insisted on decorating the estate. She brought in a massive tree for the entrance hall, hung lights in the gardens, and organized a party for the family. Not just the captains and soldiers, but their wives and children too. She wanted to build community, to remind everyone that they were more than just a criminal organization. The night of the party, Nina stood with Vincent watching their people celebrate, children running through the halls, women laughing in the kitchen, men who usually talked only about business now discussing their kids' schools and their holiday plans. You did this, Vincent said, his arm around her waist. You gave them this. We did this, Nina corrected. Together. Teresa approached, her eyes bright with tears. This house hasn't seen this much joy since Vincent was a boy. His mother used to throw parties like this. She'd be so proud of you, Nina. Of both of you. After the guests left, Vincent and Nina stood in the entrance hall, surrounded by the debris of celebration. Empty glasses, scattered wrapping paper, the smell of pine and cinnamon still in the air. I have something for you, Vincent said, pulling a small box from his pocket. I know we already exchanged gifts, but this is different. Nina opened the box to find a key, old, ornate, clearly antique. What is this? The key to my father's safe. He kept documents there, records, things he didn't want anyone else to see. Vincent's expression was serious. I'm giving it to you because I want you to know everything. No more secrets, remember? Everything I am, everything this family is, it's yours now too. Nina closed her hand around the key, feeling the weight of trust it represented. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He pulled her close. You're not just my wife, Nina. You're my partner, my conscience, my future. I trust you with everything. She kissed him, tasting champagne and promise. Then let's build that future, together. As they climbed the stairs to their room, Nina thought about how far they'd come since that wedding night, when she'd learned the truth about her husband. She'd been so afraid then, so uncertain. Now, she was walking into the darkness willingly, hand in hand with a man who'd given her his empire and his heart. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall, drops racing down the windows like tears. But inside the estate, in the warmth and light, Nina felt something she hadn't expected to find in this dangerous world. Hope. Hope that they could build something better. Hope that love could exist even in the shadows. Hope that the future they were creating together would be worth all the risks they were taking. Vincent pulled her into their room, into his arms, and Nina went willingly, ready for whatever came next. Because they were in this together now, for better or worse, in darkness and light, building something new from the ashes of the old. And that, she was learning, was what love looked like in the world of the Castellanos. Spring came to San Francisco with a vengeance, the city bursting into bloom as if celebrating its own resurrection. Nina stood in Vincent's study, their study now, reviewing the quarterly reports from their legitimate businesses. The numbers were good, better than good. The construction company had just won a major city contract. The restaurants were thriving. The waste management division was expanding into Sacramento. On paper, the Castellano family looked like a success story of American entrepreneurship. Only a handful of people knew about the other operations, the shadow businesses that still existed, but were slowly being phased out. Vincent's long game was working. Mrs. Castellano. Teresa appeared in the doorway. There's someone here to see you. Luca Moretti. Nina's head snapped up. Luca Moretti, Giovanni's son, the young man who'd taken over the family after his father's death. She and Vincent had maintained a careful peace with the Morettis, but they'd never been friendly. What was he doing here? Where's Vincent? She asked, standing. In the city, meeting with the union reps. He won't be back for another hour. Teresa's expression was concerned. Should I tell Mr. Moretti to wait? Nina thought about it. The old her would have said yes, would have hidden behind Vincent's protection, but she wasn't that person anymore. No, show him to the sitting room. I'll meet with him. Marco materialized beside her as she walked down the hallway. You sure about this, Mrs. Castellano? Luca's unpredictable, which is why we need to establish a relationship with him. If he came here alone, it means he wants to talk, not fight. Nina straightened her shoulders. Stay close, but let me handle this. Luca Moretti was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with his father's dark eyes but a softer face. He stood when she entered, his posture respectful. 2 of his men waited outside, visible through the windows. Mrs. Castellano, thank you for seeing me. Yeah, his voice was careful, educated. I know this is unusual. It is, Nina agreed, taking a seat and gesturing for him to do the same. What can I do for you, Mr. Moretti? I wanted to talk to you about the future, about our families. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I know there's bad blood between us. My father's death, the war last year. That's not something either of us can forget. But I'm not my father, Mrs. Castellano. I don't want to spend my life fighting over territory and pride. Nina studied him, looking for the trap. What do you want? Peace. Real peace, not just a truce. I've been watching what your husband is doing. The legitimate businesses, the partnerships, the way he's modernizing. It's smart. It's the future. Luca pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. I want to propose a joint venture, a real estate development in Oakland, 50-50 partnership between our families. Completely legitimate, completely legal, a way to show the other families that cooperation is more profitable than conflict. Nina opened the folder, scanning the documents. It was a solid proposal, a mixed-use development in an up-and-coming neighborhood, with residential, commercial, and community spaces. The kind of project that would bring jobs and revitalization, not just profit. Why bring this to me? She asked. Why not wait for Vincent? Because everyone knows you're the strategist. Vincent's the muscle, the enforcer. But you're the one thinking 3 moves ahead. Luca smiled slightly. And because I thought you might be more willing to take a chance on peace than your husband. He has reasons to hate my family. You don't. It was a calculated move, and Nina respected the intelligence behind it. I'll need to discuss this with Vincent. Of course. But Mrs. Castellano, I meant what I said. I'm tired of the old ways. I want to build something different, something that doesn't require my children to grow up afraid. I think you and your husband want the same thing. Maybe we can help each other. After Luca left, Nina sat in the study thinking. When Vincent returned an hour later, she showed him the proposal. He read through it, his expression darkening. It could be a trap, he said immediately. A way to get close to us, to learn our operations. It could be. Or it could be exactly what he says. A genuine offer of partnership. Nina moved to stand beside him. Vincent, if we're serious about building a legitimate empire, we need allies. The Morettis control Oakland. Working with them instead of against them makes strategic sense. They killed Anthony. They tried to kill me. Giovanni did. Luca didn't. She took his hand. I'm not saying we trust him completely, but we can verify the proposal, do our due diligence, set up protections. If it's legitimate, this could be the beginning of something bigger. A coalition of families working together instead of tearing each other apart. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring at the documents. Finally, he looked at her. What do you think we should do? I think we should take the meeting. Hear him out with our lawyers present. See if he's serious. Nina squeezed his hand. And I think we should consider that maybe, just maybe, we're not the only ones who want to change this world. The meeting happened 2 weeks later, in a neutral location, a lawyer's office in downtown San Francisco. Vincent and Nina on one side, Luca and his consigliere on the other, with attorneys for both families present. They spent 6 hours going through the proposal, negotiating terms, establishing safeguards. By the end, they had a deal, a real partnership, with both families investing equally, with oversight from independent auditors, with clear boundaries and consequences for betrayal. It was revolutionary. 2 families that had been enemies for generations, working together. To new beginnings, Luca said, raising his glass as they signed the final documents. To the future, Vincent replied, and they shook hands, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. As word of the partnership spread, other families took notice. Some were skeptical, some were hostile, but others saw the opportunity. By summer, the Castellano Moretti development had attracted interest from families in Sacramento and San Jose. What had started as a single project was becoming a movement, a shift away from the violent, territorial conflicts of the past toward something more sustainable. Nina found herself at the center of it, the unexpected diplomat of the underworld. She met with the wives of other bosses, building relationships that transcended family rivalries. She organized charity events that brought different families together for legitimate causes. She used her design business to create branding for joint ventures, making criminal organizations look like respectable corporations. "You're building a new kind of family," Marco observed one day as he drove her to a meeting, "not based on blood or fear, but on mutual interest." "That's the idea," Nina said. "Fear only works until someone stops being afraid. But shared profit, shared success, that's sustainable." In August, Nina discovered she was pregnant. She took the test 3 times, unable to believe it, then sat on the bathroom floor of their suite, crying with joy and terror in equal measure. When Vincent came home that evening, she met him at the door, wordless, and handed him the positive test. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at her, his eyes bright with tears. "We're having a baby? We're having a baby," she confirmed. And then she was in his arms, both of them crying, both of them laughing, both of them terrified and thrilled. "I'm going to be a father," Vincent said, wonder in his voice. Then his expression changed, became fierce. "I'm going to give our child a better world, Nina. I swear it. They'll never have to be afraid the way I was. They'll never have to choose between family and conscience. We're going to build something clean for them." Over the next months, as Nina's belly grew, Vincent doubled down on legitimizing the family operations. He shut down the last of the protection rackets, transitioned the gambling operations to legal establishments in Nevada, and cut ties with anyone involved in truly criminal activities. It cost them. Some men left the family, some operations became less profitable. But Vincent didn't care. "My child will inherit an empire," he told his captains during a tense meeting in October. "But it will be an empire they can be proud of. An empire that won't land them in prison or get them killed. That's the future we're building. Anyone who can't accept that is free to leave." No one left. They'd all seen the success of the new approach, the way legitimate businesses were actually more profitable than criminal ones when done right. And they'd all seen the change in Vincent, the way he smiled more, the way the weight seemed to lift from his shoulders, the way he looked at Nina like she'd given him the world. The baby came in March, a girl with Vincent's dark eyes and Nina's smile. They named her Isabella, after Vincent's mother. When Vincent held his daughter for the first time, Nina saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Absolute, uncomplicated joy. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She's absolutely perfect." Nina, exhausted and overwhelmed, watched her husband cradle their daughter and felt something settle in her chest. This was what they'd been building toward. This moment, this family, this future. All the fear and uncertainty, all the difficult choices and dangerous moments had led them here. Teresa came to visit, bringing flowers and tears of happiness. Marco brought a stuffed animal bigger than the baby. The captains and their families came to pay respects, bringing gifts, offering congratulations. Even Luca Moretti sent a lavish present and a note to the next generation. May she inherit a better world than we did. That night, after everyone had left, Nina and Vincent sat together in the nursery, watching Isabella sleep in her crib. The room was painted soft yellow, filled with toys and books, and all the hopes they had for their daughter's future. "Do you remember our wedding night?" Nina asked softly. "When you told me who you really were? I remember thinking I'd lost you before I'd really had you," Vincent said. "I remember being terrified you'd run. I almost did. I was so scared." She leaned against him. "But I'm glad I stayed. I'm glad I took the chance." "So am I." He kissed the top of her head. "You saved me, Nina. You gave me a reason to be better, to build something worth having. You gave me her." He gestured to Isabella. "You gave me everything." Nina thought about the girl she'd been, ducking into a coffee shop to escape the rain, never imagining that the man reading in the corner would change her entire life. She thought about all the moments since, the fear and the love, the danger and the hope, the slow transformation from naive designer to mafia wife to partner in an empire. "We gave each other everything," she corrected, "and we're going to give her the world. A better world than the one we inherited." "A better world," Vincent agreed. "I promise you, Nina. I promise her. No more violence, no more fear. Just family, just love, just the life we're building together." As if in response, Isabella stirred in her crib, making the small sounds that meant she'd be awake soon, hungry and demanding. Nina stood to get her, but Vincent was faster, scooping up his daughter with the careful reverence of a new father. "Hey, princess," he murmured, and Isabella's eyes opened, focusing on her father's face. "Welcome to the family. We've been waiting for you." Nina watched them together, her husband and her daughter, the Mafia boss and the innocent baby, and felt tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears this time. Tears of relief and joy and overwhelming love. Outside, rain began to fall. The same rain that had been falling that first night when Vincent revealed his truth. But this time, the rain felt like a blessing, like the world washing itself clean, making way for something new. Through the nursery window, Nina could see the lights of the estate, the gardens where she and Vincent walked in the evenings, the gates that kept them safe. This was her life now. Not the life she'd imagined, but the life she'd chosen. A life built on truth and trust, on love that had survived every test, on the belief that people could change, that empires could be transformed, that even in the darkest places, hope could take root and grow. Vincent looked up at her, Isabella cradled in his arms, and smiled, the same smile that had captured her heart in a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday. "I love you, Mrs. Castellano. I love you too," Nina said, moving to join them, wrapping her arms around her family. "Both of you, forever." And in that moment, in that room filled with soft light and new life, Nina knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. The man she'd married, the poor businessman who'd turned out to be a mafia boss, had given her more than wealth or security. He'd given her partnership, respect, and a love that had transformed them both. The tears she'd cried on their wedding night had been tears of fear and confusion, but the tears she cried now, holding her husband and daughter, were tears of joy, because sometimes the most unexpected paths led to the most extraordinary destinations, and their journey was just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know what you thought about Nina and Vincent's journey, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. What part of their story resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts below.